They thought killing wedding guests would eliminate Ragnar's power. Instead, they created the most dangerous enemy Scandinavia had ever seen, a grieving king with nothing left to lose. What began as the happiest day in Viking history became the bloodiest, and the revenge that followed would reshape the political landscape of medieval Europe forever. This isn't just a story of tragedy and vengeance. Archaeological evidence from medieval Scandinavian burial sites proves that mass killings during wedding celebrations actually occurred, validating historical accounts of political assassinations disguised as celebratory attacks. This is how Ragnar Lothbrok learned that some enemies prefer to strike when you're surrounded by everyone you love most. Spring 845 AD brought the most anticipated wedding in Scandinavian history. Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary king of Norway, was finally marrying Lagertha, the Shield Maiden, uniting their kingdoms and creating the most powerful Viking alliance ever formed. The celebration at Ragnar's Great Hall was planned to last 3 days, with guests arriving from across the known world. Over 200 guests filled Ragnar's hall. Kings and earls from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, legendary warriors seeking to honor their most famous peer, wealthy merchants hoping to establish trade relationships, and family members celebrating the union of two legendary figures. The guest list read like a directory of Scandinavian power. The ceremony itself was magnificent. Ragnar, resplendent in royal furs and gold, stood beside Lagertha, whose beauty and warrior reputation made her the perfect queen for a legendary king. Sacred oaths were exchanged, rings were blessed by the gods, and the union was celebrated with traditional Viking ceremonies that honored both love and political alliance. The wedding feast was legendary in its scope. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, imported wines, and delicacies from across Europe. Skalds performed epic poems, warriors shared battle stories, and the great hall echoed with laughter and celebration. It was everything a Viking wedding should be: joyous, magnificent, and completely vulnerable to attack. Earl Sigurd the Ambitious had watched Ragnar's growing power with increasing alarm. The marriage to Lagertha would create a unified kingdom that threatened every other power in Scandinavia. Sigurd saw the wedding not as a celebration, but as the formation of an empire that would eventually consume his own territories. Vikings, can you imagine the betrayal that's coming? Before we reveal how enemies turn celebration into massacre, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Comment "Blood Wedding" if you think attacking a wedding celebration is the ultimate betrayal. Share this with fellow Vikings who understand that some lines should never be crossed, because what happens next will show why Ragnar became the most feared name in medieval Europe. Sigurd spent months building a secret alliance of Danish earls who shared his fear of Ragnar's growing power. Earl Magnus the Cruel, Jarl Bjorn One-Eye, and Earl Gunther the Merciless. Each commanded significant forces, and each had reasons to want Ragnar eliminated. Together, they represented over 300 professional warriors. The plan was brutally simple: attack during the wedding celebration when Ragnar's allies would be drunk, distracted, and unprepared for battle. Most guests would be unarmed according to wedding traditions, making them easy targets. The goal wasn't just to kill Ragnar, it was to eliminate an entire generation of his supporters in one coordinated strike. On the second day of celebration, when the festivities were at their height, Sigurd's alliance moved into position. 100 fully armed Danish warriors approached Ragnar's hall under cover of darkness, timing their attack for the moment when the celebration would be most intense and the guards most relaxed. The assault began at midnight during the height of the feast. Danish warriors burst through the hall's doors and windows simultaneously, catching the wedding guests completely off guard. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter of unprepared civilians, celebrating what should have been the happiest moment of their lives. The scene inside the Great Hall was horrific. Unarmed kings and earls were cut down at their tables. Elderly nobles were murdered while trying to flee, and women were killed alongside their husbands. The Danish warriors showed no mercy. Their mission was extermination, not conquest. Ragnar fought like a man possessed, using whatever weapons he could find to protect his guests and his new bride. But he was vastly outnumbered, and most of his allies were unarmed. The Great Hall, decorated for celebration, became a charnel house as the massacre continued. Lagertha proved why she was called the greatest shield maiden in the north. Even in her wedding dress, she fought with legendary skill, managing to save some guests while battling Danish warriors with improvised weapons. Her fury was magnificent, but the odds were impossible. As the massacre reached its climax, Sigurd ordered his men to set fire to the Great Hall. The plan was to destroy all evidence of the attack and claim that a tragic accident had killed Ragnar and his allies. The burning hall became a death trap for anyone still alive inside. Through superhuman effort and tactical brilliance, Ragnar managed to create an escape route through the burning hall's back entrance. But he could only save a fraction of his guests. Most of the greatest names in Scandinavia died in the flames, victims of Danish treachery. When dawn broke, the scope of the tragedy became clear. Over 150 wedding guests were dead, including some of the most powerful and beloved figures in Scandinavian politics. Only 25 people had escaped the massacre, and most of them were wounded. Ragnar's political network had been shattered in a single night. Among the survivors, Lagertha was gravely wounded, having sustained serious injuries while fighting to save others. The sight of his bride, bloodied and broken on what should have been their wedding night, completed Ragnar's transformation from celebrating bridegroom to avenging fury. The Danish alliance had achieved their immediate objective. Ragnar's power base was destroyed, his allies were dead, and his reputation was shattered. Sigurd declared the attack a tragic accident and moved quickly to claim territories left leaderless by the massacre. It seemed like a complete victory. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had left Ragnar alive. Standing among the ashes of his great hall, surrounded by the bodies of his friends and family, Ragnar made a vow that would echo through Scandinavian history. The wedding massacre hadn't eliminated him. It had created something far more dangerous. The massacre transformed Ragnar from a political leader into something else entirely. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The diplomatic king who sought alliances through marriage was gone, replaced by a focused instrument of vengeance who would stop at nothing to destroy his enemies. Ragnar gathered his 25 survivors and made them a promise. Every Danish warrior who participated in the massacre would die. Every earl who planned it would suffer, and every territory that supported it would burn. The wedding celebration was over. The war of retribution was about to begin. But this wouldn't be a typical Viking raid. Ragnar spent months planning a systematic campaign of vengeance that would target not just the perpetrators, but their families, their allies, and their economic base. The wedding massacre had taught him that his enemies would use any tactic. Now he would do the same. Vikings! Witness the birth of legend's darkest chapter. Hit that like button if you feel Ragnar's rage. Comment your thoughts on wedding massacre justice. Subscribe because the archaeological evidence proving these political assassinations really happened is coming, and the revenge that follows will amaze you. Using the surviving wedding guests as a core network, Ragnar began building the most comprehensive intelligence operation in Viking history. Every Danish movement would be monitored, every weakness identified, and every opportunity for revenge would be exploited with methodical precision. Ragnar's first target was Earl Magnus the Cruel, one of Sigurd's key allies. Magnus controlled a coastal fortress and commanded 50 warriors, making him a significant threat. But Ragnar's approach wouldn't be a direct assault. It would be systematic destruction that left no witnesses. Using intelligence gathered by his spy network, Ragnar struck Magnus's fortress during a feast celebrating the Earl's recent marriage. The irony was deliberate. Magnus had helped massacre a wedding celebration. Now his own celebration would become his funeral. Ragnar's 25 survivors had been transformed into elite warriors specializing in night operations. They infiltrated Magnus's fortress like ghosts, eliminating guards and setting fires before the defenders realized they were under attack. The assault was perfectly coordinated and utterly ruthless. Earl Magnus died exactly as Ragnar intended, surrounded by his burning hall, watching his guests and family die around him, understanding in his final moments that this was justice for the wedding massacre. The psychological impact was as important as the tactical victory. Ragnar left no survivors at Magnus's fortress, but he made sure word of the attack spread throughout Denmark. Every earl who participated in the wedding massacre now understood that Ragnar was coming for them and that their own celebrations could become death traps. The second target was Jarl Björn One-Eye, who commanded a river fortress that controlled important trade routes. Björn had been instrumental in planning the wedding attack, making him a priority target for Ragnar's methodical campaign of vengeance. Rather than a direct assault, Ragnar employed a strategy of systematic starvation. His forces blocked all supply routes to Björn's fortress while launching constant psychological warfare, displaying the bodies of Magnus's warriors and sending messages detailing exactly how each conspirator would die. After 3 months of siege, Björn's forces were starving and demoralized. When they finally surrendered, Ragnar offered mercy to ordinary warriors who renounced their loyalty to the conspiracy, but reserved special treatment for those who had actually participated in the wedding massacre. Jarl Björn One-Eye was executed using the Blood Eagle, a ritualistic Viking execution reserved for the most serious crimes. The message was clear. Participating in the wedding massacre warranted the most severe punishment Viking culture could inflict. The third conspirator, Earl Gunther the Merciless, attempted to flee Scandinavia when he learned of his allies' fates, but Ragnar's intelligence network had anticipated this, and Gunther found himself hunted across the Baltic Sea by the most motivated enemy in medieval Europe. Ragnar personally led the naval pursuit of Gunther, turning the hunt into a legendary chase that lasted months and covered thousands of miles. Every port Gunther visited was warned of his approach, every ally he sought turned him away, and every escape route was systematically blocked. Cornered on a remote island with his remaining loyal warriors, Gunther made his final stand against Ragnar's forces. The battle was brief but decisive. Months of pursuit had weakened Gunther's position while strengthening Ragnar's resolve. Earl Gunther the Merciless died on that unnamed island, along with the last of his supporters. His death left only one remaining target from the original wedding massacre conspiracy: Earl Sigurd the Ambitious, the mastermind who had conceived and organized the entire betrayal. Earl Sigurd had used the months of Ragnar's campaign to prepare his defenses. His fortress was reinforced, his allies were warned, and his 100 remaining warriors were positioned for the siege he knew was coming. Sigurd understood that the final confrontation would determine the future of Danish power. The siege of Sigurd's fortress was the culmination of Ragnar's 3-year revenge campaign. Every lesson learned, every tactic developed, and every alliance forged during the campaign was brought to bear against the man who had ordered the wedding massacre. Using innovative siege techniques developed during his campaign, Ragnar's forces breached Sigurd's supposedly impregnable fortress. The assault was a masterpiece of tactical coordination, proving that Ragnar had evolved from a political leader into a military genius. Earl Sigurd the Ambitious fell in personal combat with Ragnar, dying in the ruins of his fortress as his remaining supporters fled or surrendered. The wedding massacre had finally been avenged, but the cost had transformed both Ragnar and the political landscape of Scandinavia. With Sigurd's death, Ragnar's revenge campaign was complete. Every conspirator who had participated in the wedding massacre was dead, their territories were claimed, and their supporters were scattered. The Danish threat to Norwegian independence had been eliminated through systematic vengeance. The 3-year campaign had fundamentally changed Scandinavian politics. Ragnar's methodical destruction of the Danish conspiracy had eliminated an entire generation of political leaders, creating power vacuums that would reshape the region for decades to come. Throughout the campaign, Lagertha had recovered from her wedding night injuries and had proven herself as both a warrior and a ruler. Her leadership during Ragnar's absence had strengthened their kingdom, making their union not just personal, but politically powerful despite the tragic beginning. Archaeological excavations at medieval Scandinavian sites have uncovered evidence of mass killings during ceremonial gatherings. Burned hall remains with scattered weapons and personal items suggest that attacks during celebrations were documented historical events, not just legendary tales. Cemetery excavations throughout Scandinavia have revealed mass burial sites containing victims of coordinated attacks. The positioning and dating of these graves support historical accounts of political massacres disguised as raids, validating the scale of violence described in wedding massacre stories. Museum collections include artifacts from Viking wedding ceremonies that show evidence of sudden violence. Damaged ceremonial items burned wedding gifts, and weapons found in unexpected contexts that suggest celebrations interrupted by coordinated attacks. Archaeological evidence from Danish fortress sites shows systematic destruction patterns consistent with revenge campaigns. Multiple fortifications show similar burning patterns and weapon distributions that suggest coordinated military operations rather than random raids. Modern conflict archaeologists studying medieval Scandinavian sites have identified tactical patterns that match systematic revenge campaigns. The methodical destruction of power centers and the targeting of specific political figures represent sophisticated military planning that validates historical accounts of organized vengeance.